Hey, my name's Logan. I'm 27, and I work as a data analyst at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. We're not some flashy startup with ping pong tables and free lunches every day, but it's a solid place with about 30 people total. The vibe is casual, mostly young folks in their 20s and 30s who love their cold brew and indie playlists. Every morning, a bunch of us grab breakfast at the little bakery down the block, arguing over who pays this time, then head in laughing about whatever dumb meme someone shared in the group chat. I'm not the guy who stands out in a crowd. I'm reliable, sure. Always the one fixing someone's spreadsheet formula or troubleshooting why the Wi-Fi's acting up. My coworkers are a fun bunch. Julie from accounting, who's always sending me ridiculous stickers in Slack. Hayden in IT, who drags me into late-night gaming sessions. And Natalie, our resident optimist who turns every team lunch into a storytelling fest. We bond over shared frustrations like buggy software updates or those endless Zoom calls that could have been emails. Life at the office isn't glamorous, but it's comfortable, and I've carved out my spot without much drama. My direct boss is Margaret Bennett, the head of analytics. She's 44 with neatly tied back brown hair and a wardrobe full of crisp, light-colored blouses. Margaret's got this reputation for being strict about deadlines and details, but she's fair, never yells, always takes the time to explain things if you're stuck. On Fridays, she sometimes surprises the team with a box of donuts from that same bakery, which makes her seem more approachable than her no-nonsense emails suggest. I've always respected her. She's the kind of leader who pushes you to do better without making you feel small. That particular Monday started like any other. Coffee in hand, diving into my inbox while the rain pattered against the windows. Typical Seattle weather. Our team lead called in sick, so Margaret emailed me to help out with some project docs. She needed them delivered to the conference room on the fourth floor for the weekly leadership meeting. I'm usually glued to my desk on the second floor, buried in data dashboards, so this was a bit out of my routine. I grabbed the stack of papers, my mind already racing through the afternoon's to-do list, run those quarterly reports, double-check the metrics for the client demo. I hustled up the stairs, papers clutched under one arm, mentally rehearsing what I'd say if anyone asked questions. The hallway up there was quiet, just the hum of the AC and distant keyboard clicks. I spotted what I thought was the conference room door. Plain wood, no label, and pushed it open without knocking, figuring I'd drop the files and head back down. But it wasn't the conference room. It was Margaret's private office. And there she was, standing by her desk, midway through changing her shirt after what must have been a morning meeting. Her blouse was half unbuttoned, her hair loose and falling over her shoulders in a way I'd never seen. The room smelled faintly of her coffee and something floral, like her perfume. Time froze for a split second. Me standing there like an idiot, her eyes widening in surprise. I felt my face heat up instantly, blood rushing to my ears. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I stammered, averting my eyes and backing up a step. "I thought this was the conference room. I didn't mean to." She quickly pulled her shirt closed, her expression shifting from shock to a forced composure, though I could see the flush on her cheeks. "Logan, calm down. It's okay," she said, her voice steady but a little rushed. "Just put the files down on the desk, and we'll pretend you didn't see anything, right?" I nodded furiously, setting the stack down with shaking hands. "Of course, you can trust me on that." My heart was pounding like I'd run a marathon, and I mumbled another apology before bolting out, closing the door behind me as gently as I could. The walk back to my desk felt endless. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. HR complaints, awkward meetings, maybe even getting fired for inappropriate conduct. How could I be so careless? I replayed the moment over and over. The glimpse of her vulnerability, the way our eyes locked for that brief, electric second. It wasn't intentional, but I felt like a total creep. Lunchtime came, and I joined the crew outside on the patio, picking at a sandwich while they joked around. Julie noticed I was off. "You look like you saw a ghost, man." "Everything good?" I brushed it off with a laugh, but inside I was spiraling. Then my phone pinged. An email from Margaret. "Logan, come by my office at 2 p.m. The group teased me. "Ooh, private meeting with the boss? Must be in trouble." But their words only amplified my dread. Hayden clapped me on the back. "She's cool, dude. Probably nothing." I nodded, forcing a smile, but my stomach was in knots. At 2 p.m. sharp, I knocked on her door, the right one this time. "Come in," she called. I stepped inside, heart racing, ready for the lecture. She was at her desk, looking composed as ever, papers spread out. "Logan, about this morning, what room were you aiming for?" I swallowed hard. "I'm really sorry, I mixed up the doors. It was a complete accident. I promise I wasn't trying to—" She held up a hand, then smiled faintly, surprising me. "It's fine. Mistakes happen. Actually, I read your project proposal from last week. It's solid work. How would you feel about leading a small pilot team for the next 6 months? I'd oversee it directly." I blinked, stunned. From potential disaster to a promotion? It felt too good to be true, but her expression was genuine. "I'd love that," I managed. "Thank you." As I left her office, a mix of relief and excitement washed over me. Little did I know that wrong door had just opened up a whole new path, one that would change everything. From that unexpected meeting in her office, my work life shifted gears in ways I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, I was scheduled for bi-weekly one-on-ones with Margaret to discuss the pilot project. At first, it felt intimidating, sitting across from her in that same room, notepad in hand, scribbling furiously as she dissected my ideas with her usual precision. She'd lean forward, pointing at a chart or a data point, her voice calm but probing. "What if we adjust the variables here? Walk me through your reasoning." I'd nod, heart racing a bit, determined not to mess up under her watchful eye. She was thorough, catching inconsistencies I'd overlooked, but she never made me feel dumb about them. Instead, she'd say things like, "That's a solid start, let's build on it," which somehow boosted my confidence without sugarcoating the flaws. Those early sessions were all business. I'd prepare meticulously the night before, reviewing notes until my eyes burned, replaying potential questions in my head. Margaret's office became a familiar space. The neat stacks of reports on her desk, the faint scent of her herbal tea, the way the afternoon light filtered through the blinds. I kept things professional, steering clear of any reference to that awkward door incident, though it lingered in the back of my mind like an unspoken footnote. She seemed to have moved past it too, focusing solely on the work. But as the weeks went on, I started noticing the cracks in her polished facade. Not weaknesses, but glimpses of the person behind the title. It began with small moments. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a review of some preliminary data models, I cracked a joke about how my initial proposal must have looked like a kindergarten art project compared to her standards. She paused, then let out a dry chuckle. "Actually, Logan, you're the first person to barge into my office unannounced and still have the guts to apologize on the spot. I appreciate that kind of honesty. It's rare around here." Her tone was light, almost playful, and for the first time I saw her smile reach her eyes. It caught me off guard, making the room feel less like a boardroom and more like a conversation between equals. From then on, I relaxed a little, no longer treating every meeting like a high-stakes exam. Our discussion started spilling over from pure analytics into more personal territory, naturally, without either of us forcing it. I'd share stories from the team, how Julie had once pranked me by filling my Slack with cat memes during a serious client call, or how Hayden and I stayed up until 2 a.m. troubleshooting a server glitch, only to realize it was a loose cable. I'd describe our group bets on who could fix the office coffee machine fastest, laughing as I recounted the time Natalie won by sheer luck. Margaret listened intently, her usual seriousness softening. "Sounds like you've built a real community down there," she'd say, with a hint of envy in her voice. "It's good to have that. Keeps the monotony at bay." In return, she opened up more than I expected. One rainy Thursday, as we pored over trend forecasts, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "You know, Logan, when I was your age, I thought I'd have it all figured out by now. I was the oldest in my family, always the one expected to succeed. I started a small consulting firm right out of college, poured everything into it, but it tanked after 2 years. Lost savings, investors pulled out, the works." She paused, tracing a finger along the edge of her desk. "And being a woman in this field? People questioned every decision, assumed I got here on luck or favors. There were nights I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if it was worth it. But I kept going because, well, if I stopped, who would pick up the pieces?" Her words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. I didn't know what to say at first, but I shared a bit about my own doubts, how I'd switched majors twice in college, feeling like I was always playing catch up. I get it, I told her. Sometimes it feels like everyone's got their path mapped out except you. She nodded, and for a moment the age gap and hierarchy faded. We were just two people navigating the grind. The turning point came during a casual lunch at that little Italian spot a block from the office. We'd finished early one day, and she suggested grabbing sandwiches to discuss the next phase. Over paninis and iced tea, the conversation flowed effortlessly. She asked about my weekend plans, and I mentioned a hike I'd done with Hayden. Nothing special, just escaping the city rain. Then, out of nowhere, she tilted her head and said, "Logan, why are you always so kind? Like that time you ran out in the downpour to grab bubble teas for the whole team, just because Julie joked about craving one." Not many people do that. I shrugged, a little embarrassed. I guess it's habit. We all look out for each other here. It makes the tough days bearable. She studied me for a second, then smiled warmly, the kind that lit up her face. That's refreshing. In my world, it's rare to see that without strings attached. The air between us felt different after that. Warmer, more connected. As we walked back chatting about favorite podcasts, I realized Margaret wasn't just my boss anymore. She was someone with her own battles, her own quiet strength, and maybe even her own loneliness. I started looking forward to our meetings, not just for the project, but for those glimpses into who she really was. Little did I know, those shared moments were laying the foundation for something deeper, something that would test us both. As the pilot project gained momentum, things felt electric around the office, at least for our small team. Julie, Hayden, Natalie, and I were hitting milestones left and right, our data models churning out insights that exceeded even our optimistic projections. We'd huddle in the break room after hours, laptops open, debating tweaks to algorithms while sharing takeout from the Thai place down the street. "This is gold," Hayden would say, high-fiving everyone after a successful test run. Julie kept the morale high with her endless supply of motivational playlists, and Natalie turned our progress reports into visual masterpieces that made the numbers pop. We even started talking about a team outing, a picnic at Discovery Park once we nailed the next phase. It was the kind of camaraderie that made long days fly by, and for the first time in my career, I felt like I was part of something truly impactful. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Whispers started circulating in the hallways, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. I'd catch snippets during coffee breaks. "Logan's getting a lot of FaceTime with Margaret. Must be nice." Or, "Wonder if that's why he got the lead spot so fast." It stung, especially since our lunches and meetings were strictly professional, but people twisted them into something more. Even small things, like me grabbing an extra coffee for her during a late session, got blown out of proportion. Julie pulled me aside one day, her voice low. "Hey, ignore the gossip. You earned this." But it was harder to brush off when I noticed colleagues scrutinizing my work more closely, pointing out minor errors that would have gone unnoticed before. The tension escalated when Marcus, the head of sales, a sharp-dressed guy in his 50s with a reputation for playing politics, got involved. He started questioning the project's resource allocation in cross-department meetings, subtly implying that Margaret was showing favoritism. "We need to ensure fairness," he'd say, his eyes flicking toward me. It felt personal, like he was using me as leverage to undermine her. I overheard him in the elevator once, talking to another manager. "That kid's too green for a lead role. Wonder what strings were pulled." My stomach twisted, but I kept my head down, focusing on the data to prove them wrong. One afternoon, Margaret summoned me to her office, her email curt. "Need to discuss project status." I walked in expecting our usual rundown, but her expression was tighter than normal, lines of fatigue etched around her eyes. She closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Logan, things might get rougher from here," she said, her voice low and measured. "There's pushback. People questioning decisions, including yours. Don't let it distract you." She didn't name names, but I knew she meant Marcus and the rumor mill. Seeing her like that, not the unflappable leader but a woman under real strain, hit me hard. "I'm not backing down," I replied, meeting her gaze. "This project is our team's sweat and late nights, and I believe in what we're doing. In us." She nodded, a flicker of gratitude softening her features, but the weight on her shoulders was palpable. The pressure built as the weeks dragged on. Deadlines loomed, and the scrutiny made every step feel like walking a tightrope. Natalie confided that she was second-guessing her contributions, worried the rumors would taint our success. Hayden cracked jokes to lighten the mood, but even he seemed on edge during our group sessions. We pushed through, staying late to refine presentations and run simulations, but the atmosphere had shifted. Less laughter, more quiet determination. Then came that pivotal evening. We'd pulled an all-nighter prepping for a key demo, the office empty except for our corner lit by desk lamps. Pizza boxes littered the table as we brainstormed, the team rallying despite the exhaustion. Julie high-fived me after nailing a tricky visualization. "We're unstoppable." As everyone packed up around 9 p.m., waving goodbyes and promising to crush it tomorrow, Margaret lingered by the window, staring out at the city lights. She turned to me, her posture weary. "Logan, wait a minute." I paused, sensing something deeper. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching. "It's been a while since I've trusted someone like this, like you. Not just with the work, but with everything." Her words hung there, vulnerable and real. In that instant, the barriers of age, of positions, dissolved. We weren't boss and employee. We were two people leaning on each other amid the storm. I didn't know what to say, but I felt it too. A connection that went beyond spreadsheets and strategies. As I left that night, the rain starting to fall again, I resolved to stand by her, no matter how fierce the whispers grew. The project, and whatever was budding between us, deserved that fight. The rumors didn't just simmer. They boiled over into a full-blown crisis. Anonymous emails started circulating, one landing in the inboxes of the leadership team accusing Margaret of favoritism, claiming my rapid rise was due to personal connections rather than merit. It was vague enough to avoid outright libel, but pointed enough to sting. Marcus seized the opportunity, pushing for a formal review of the project during the next all-hands meeting. "We need transparency," he argued, his tone dripping with false concern. "If resources are being misallocated, it affects us all." He didn't look at me directly, but the implication was clear. I was the weak link, the undeserving beneficiary of Margaret's supposed bias. I watched Margaret during that meeting, her face a mask of professionalism, as she fielded questions without flinching. But later in private, the toll was evident. Her eyes had dark circles and her usual crisp energy seemed dulled, like she was carrying an invisible weight. She didn't complain or lash out. She just powered through, reviewing reports with the same meticulous focus. It killed me to see her like that, isolated in her role, absorbing the hits without retaliation. One day, as I passed her in the hallway, she gave me a tight smile and said, "Keep your head down, Logan. This will pass." But I could tell it was wearing her down. The backlash rippled through our team too. Julie, usually the unbreakable optimist, broke down during a late afternoon huddle. "What if they're right?" she whispered, tears welling up as she stared at her screen. "What if this tanks because of the drama? I don't want to be part of some office scandal." Hayden, ever the pragmatist, suggested we pause the project to let things cool off. Maybe we dial it back until the dust settles. No point fighting uphill. Natalie nodded in agreement, her enthusiasm faded. The room felt heavy, our once vibrant collaboration now strained by doubt. I couldn't let it unravel like that. "Guys, listen," I said, standing up. "We've poured everything into this, not for approval, but because we believe in it. We're proving ourselves every day, and no gossip changes that. Let's show them what we're made of." It wasn't a rousing speech, but it sparked something. Julie wiped her eyes and cracked a weak joke about needing more coffee. Hayden slapped his laptop shut with renewed determination, and we dove back in, working harder than ever. I threw myself into the prep, staying late to cross-check data sets and simulate scenarios, but my mind kept drifting to Margaret. She was bearing the brunt, fielding the subtle digs and extra scrutiny without a word of defense. One evening, after most of the office had cleared out, I spotted her sitting alone at the end of the hallway bench, staring at her phone with a distant expression. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that twisted my gut. I grabbed a hot tea from the kitchen, herbal, the kind she preferred, and approached quietly. "Hey," I said softly, holding it out. "Thought you might need this." She looked up surprised, then accepted it with a faint nod. Thanks, Logan. We sat in silence for a minute, the hum of the building's vents the only sound. Finally, she spoke. This job, it takes pieces of you sometimes. You think you're tough, but then something like this reminds you how alone it can feel at the top. Her voice cracked just a bit, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. You're not alone, I replied. Not with this. Whatever happens, I'm here. We all are. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine, and for the first time, she let the facade slip completely. Thank you for not walking away. Most people would. The night before the big demo, the one that would make or break our project, we pulled an all-nighter as a team. The office was a mess of whiteboards covered in scribbles, empty energy drink cans, and laptops humming. Margaret joined us around 7 p.m., rolling up her sleeves to dive into the details. She caught errors I'd missed, refined Natalie's slides, and even laughed at one of Hayden's bad puns about pivot tables. By 11 p.m., as the others trickled out with yawns and promises to reconvene early, she stayed behind, double-checking the final deck. I lingered too, pretending to organize my notes, but really just wanting to make sure she was okay. When the door clicked shut behind the last person, she sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. This could go either way tomorrow, she murmured. I sat across from her, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows. We've got this. You've led us here. She looked up, and that's when I saw it. The tears brimming in her eyes, unspoken exhaustion finally breaking through. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking silently. It was the first time I'd seen her truly vulnerable. Not the composed leader, but a woman pushed to her limit. Without thinking, I reached across the table and gently took her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed back, her fingers trembling slightly. We sat like that for what felt like ages, no words needed. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me to face this alone." I held her gaze. I wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. In that quiet moment, something shifted irrevocably. It wasn't just about the project anymore. We were admitting we needed each other, not as boss and employee, but as two people who'd found strength in one another. As the clock ticked toward midnight, we both knew the real test was ahead, but whatever came, we'd face it side by side. The demo day arrived like a storm we'd all been bracing for. The conference room packed with leadership, including a stone-faced Marcus. My hands were clammy as I clicked through the slides, walking the group through our models, the projections, and the real-world impacts we'd simulated. Julie handled the Q&A with her usual flair, Hayden backed up the tech specs flawlessly, and Natalie nailed the visuals that made our data sing. Margaret sat at the head of the table, her presence steady, interjecting only when needed to clarify or defend a point. When the final slide faded and the room fell silent, I held my breath. Then came the nods, the murmurs of approval, and finally, the CEO's verdict. This exceeds expectations, full rollout approved. Applause rippled through, and just like that, the weight lifted. Marcus offered a curt congratulations. His earlier skepticism deflated. Forced to acknowledge what our numbers proved, we'd earned this. The office buzzed with victory that afternoon. Emails poured in from other departments praising the innovation, and our team was the toast of the floor. Julie organized an impromptu happy hour in the break room, complete with cupcakes and cheap sparkling cider. Hayden blasted our victory playlist, and Natalie hugged everyone twice. Even colleagues who'd whispered behind our backs now clapped me on the shoulder. Knew you had it in you. The rumors that had poisoned the air for weeks seemed to evaporate, replaced by genuine respect. Margaret moved through it all with quiet grace, accepting compliments but deflecting credit to the team. When our eyes met across the room, she gave me a small, knowing smile, one that said we'd crossed the finish line together. With the pressure off, Margaret and I didn't hide anymore. It wasn't a dramatic announcement. It unfolded naturally, like the fog lifting over Puget Sound on a clear morning. During the team picnic at Discovery Park the following weekend, our long-promised celebration, we sat on blankets under the trees, the group sharing stories and passing around sandwiches. Julie, ever the instigator, raised her soda. To Logan and Margaret, finally owning what's been obvious to the rest of us. Laughter erupted and Hayden chimed in, About time you two stopped pretending it was all about spreadsheets. Natalie grinned. We've got your back, you know. You earned this happiness, too. Margaret blushed but laughed along, her hand finding mine under the table. No one judged. They'd seen us weather the storm, our bond forged in those late nights and tough calls. If anything, it humanized us, turning whispers into well-wishes. The shift felt liberating. In the office, we kept things professional, no overt displays, but the tension was gone. Colleagues who'd once side-eyed our lunches now joked about it openly. Power duo alert! Marcus backed off entirely, his review requests quietly withdrawn. Margaret seemed lighter, her steps quicker, her emails dotted with more emojis than before. For me, it was like emerging from a tunnel. The doubt, the fear of judgment, all faded. I dove deeper into my role, mentoring juniors and pitching new ideas, but now with a quiet assurance that came from knowing I wasn't alone in the fight. One crisp evening a few weeks later, I suggested a walk along Lake Union, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered stars. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from nearby parks, and we strolled side by side, our conversation meandering from work wins to weekend plans. As we paused by a bench overlooking the boats bobbing gently, I turned to her. If you weren't head of analytics anymore, if it was just you, no title, what would you choose? She thought for a moment, gazing out at the horizon. I'd choose to be myself, she said softly. A woman who dares to love, to fail, to start over without apologies. For so long, I've hidden behind the role, afraid of what people might think. But with you, I feel like I can breathe again. I took her hand, intertwining our fingers. I'd choose to stay right here with you, through whatever comes. You've shown me what real strength looks like, not just pushing through, but letting someone in. We sat there as the sun dipped lower, the skyline glowing in hues of orange and purple. The world around us hummed, joggers passing, distant laughter from a nearby cafe. But in that moment, it was just us. No more hiding, no more defenses. We'd faced the doubts, the scrutiny, and emerged not broken, but bonded. As we walked back, her arm linked with mine, I reflected on how that one wrong door had led here, to a connection that defied expectations, built on trust earned through fire. Our story wasn't wrapped in a neat bow, there were no grand gestures or eternal vows, but it was real, a beginning rather than an end. In the days that followed, we navigated the new normal, balancing work and us, stealing quiet dinners after hours, planning a weekend getaway to the San Juans. The office adapted, our team thrived, and for the first time I felt truly seen, not as the guy who fixed spreadsheets, but as someone worthy of standing beside her. That misplaced step into her office hadn't been a mistake. It was the door to something profound. And as we moved forward, hand in hand, I knew I'd never regret walking through it.